Hello, everyone, and welcome. Telestax is pleased to host our ResCom1 Marketplace IQ series, where we focus on partner relationships and what they can mean for you. Today, we are pleased to feature Tom Ngo, who's the CEO of Lumen AI. Lumen's intelligent chatbot drives appointment-related conversations all the way to an actual calendar change, confirming, canceling, scheduling, or even rescheduling at your pace. Now, before we get started with today's live webinar, there are just a few housekeeping items. All participants are in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar, but please feel free to chat any questions in the Q&A box located at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and we will do our best to get to all of your questions at the end of today's session. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tom Ngo. Tom, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Maria. It's very good to be here as a guest at Telestax. We're just delighted to be a ResCom1 Marketplace partner. And I'd like to thank everybody who's attending. We appreciate your time and really hope that we create a meaningful opportunity for you and your business. I think there are some good things we could potentially do together. Before I introduce myself and Lumen.ai, let me start with a little bit of a teaser. This is an often repeated quote by Charles Darwin, or at least attributed to him. It was actually, he never said it as far as we understand. It was actually a professor in the Midwest reporting on his work. But it is, I think we would all agree, true that this industry is shifting rapidly. And those who are responsive to the change will be the best adapted to surviving the change and thriving within it. In a moment, I'd like to do a flash poll to learn more about you. But for now, I'd like to address the service providers in the audience. You live in a good news, bad news landscape that's evolving very rapidly. And I hope I haven't made your eyes glaze over on slide 2 with yet another chart about the growth of mobile messaging. You hear it all the time. Messaging is on the rise. But honestly, it's over the top, grabbing share from SMS. SMS as a whole is dropping. That drop is driven by the decrease in person-to-person SMS. But application-to-person SMS is growing rapidly and partly compensating. And so here's the quandary. It's a great opportunity. The quandary for service providers, though, is you're sitting in all that traffic. You're owning great customer relationships, but unfortunately, pricing and margins are both declining in that space. So you're in the catbird seat. It's a threat and it's an opportunity. The days of selling feeds and speeds have been amazing, but they're eroding. And so what I'm hoping to describe today is one of the many ways we could work together to stay on top of the wave. So let me illustrate what I mean by that. So we know that margins are tending to migrate up the stack. So over-the-top apps give you zero margin, of course, so that's not even on the stack. SMS, raw SMS message is about 1/3 of a penny. Now, the next couple of rows I'm going to put on here are domain-specific. Since we're talking about appointment reminders today, I'll just point out that a dumb outbound SMS reminder, the kind that is very easily obtainable today, with no AI, is about 9 cents per SMS reminder. And as we dig in today, I think we'll find that when you have the ability to complete an appointment rescheduling interactively using AI, there's plenty of margin to go around. And as I mentioned, this is just one domain in which this is true. We believe that this is going to be true generally. So here's our first flash poll. We'd like to understand what kind of organization you represent. Are you a telecom service provider? And we can go ahead and flip over to the Ready Talk poll. Are you a vertical software vendor? So that looks like the third poll. Are you an appointment-driven business? For example, a dental office or a chain. Are you an industry analyst? And if you're not any of the above, what could you possibly be? So we'll go ahead and wait for a couple of answers there. As we talk today, I can see the numbers on the service provider count going up very fast here. I will be addressing primarily service providers, but of course I hope that our comments will be of much more general interest. So as we go through today, we're going to be talking a fair amount about the landscape, the AI landscape for natural language interactions, but we'll be doing a deep dive on appointment rescheduling. So let's go ahead and there we go. Lots of service providers, and then a few vertical software vendors. That's delightful to hear because that's, from our point of view, one step further on the distribution chain. And I'm also very glad to understand that there are some attendees from appointment-driven businesses. So let's go ahead and switch back to the slides. All right. So my name is Tom No. I've held a number of senior management positions in organizations that are innovation-centered, both as an entrepreneur and as a technologist. I help startups find their market. I've also been active in about half a dozen technology fields. One example was the earliest application of machine learning to locomotion and graphics. And another example is some work that we did in the separation of audio mixtures. So if you think of the process that your brain has to go through if you're at a party and hearing 4 or 5 different conversations, how is it that you tune out most of them and focus hopefully on the person that you're addressing? All of these are fields where computational adaptation and learning are the key to pulling structure out of disorder. And so that's the common thread that will run through what we talk about today. Now, at Lumen.ai, we've bottled some of that AI smarts into a platform capable of carrying on human conversations. And I've spared you the architecture diagram, but do bear in mind that this is a platform on which bots can be built. And one service that we've built on the platform is Lumen.ai Live Agent Assist, which we'll talk about in that's a different webinar. But just to dwell on this very briefly, that is a 3-way bot. It's unlike many other services, including others that work with live agents. This one is able to participate in a conversation with a live agent and a visitor concurrently. It's in production today, and if you look at the number of full sentence live agent responses that it's able to predict verbatim, that number is up to 20%, and that's in a free-form environment, which requires understanding arbitrarily complicated English phrasing. So as I said, that's a different webinar. Today we're here to talk about our Smart Appointment Bot, which is a 2-way bot built on the same platform, and therefore benefiting from many of the same features and capabilities. So let's tee this up by thinking just at a 30,000-foot level. Think of the last time you received an appointment reminder. It might be from a dentist or from some other medical provider. Maybe it was a beauty salon. Maybe it was something having to do with fitness. Any business that depends on appointments. And I'm going to ask you about that in a moment in a flash poll. But the question for you is, did you get that reminder via text? What were you doing at the time? Were you in a meeting? Were you having dinner with friends and family? Were you brushing your teeth? Did you have the ability to answer right away? Did you need to get back in touch with the office for some reason? And if so, did you have time to find to place a return call? Well, if that had been a smart interactive reminder, you would have been able to text back and forth right there. You wouldn't have waited until somebody at the front desk had you on hold. And the Lumen Cloud Service manages everything. So on the consumer side, of course, you see an interactive chat conversation done through SMS. But on the provider side, everything is handled by the Lumen Cloud. And so none of these people on the left are involved. They have more important things to do. So here's our second flash poll here. When you received your last dental reminder, if you can remember, what could you do via SMS? Maybe SMS wasn't involved at all. Maybe you received a phone call or a postcard, or maybe nothing. Maybe you received a reminder via SMS, but now the question is, could you reply via SMS to confirm? Could you reply via SMS to cancel? Could you reply to reschedule a new time? And also, could you use SMS inbound anytime, anywhere to do any of the above? And I think the state of the art that we'll find is that you can receive a reminder via SMS from many providers, and most of them give you the ability to cancel, well, to confirm on the spot, and then cancellation usually requires a phone call back. A few of them do allow cancellation. So let's go ahead. We've got quite a few results in here. Let's just take a look. And yes, that confirms. It's very interesting. A number of people were able to reply to confirm, but not having received a reminder. So I'd love to find out how that worked. But normally you'd get the reminder, and then the reminder would say, please tap C to confirm. Okay, so let's head on back to our slides. And let's take a look at this problem from the industry standpoint. This is a high dollar value problem. At the industry level, one vendor quotes $150 billion in losses nationwide due to no-shows. If you look at the level of a single transaction, the cost per hour is normally around $100 to $200, depending on vertical. And I was astounded to find out that the no-show rate is between 15 and 25% for a dental office. And of course, for other verticals, the no-show rate could be lower or higher. So there are many verticals that have this issue. Some of the highest no-show rates are in mental health for reasons that I'm sure, can all understand. But now if we look on the level of a single practice, here are some numbers taken from a typical dental office. So the potential net collections for that office are about $1.5 million. Their actuals are closer to 1.1. And the reason is that 25% no-show rate. During that 25% of the time, chairs are empty. And in the meantime, that dental office is suffering the full burn rate of the salaries of dentists, front office people, the lease on the property, and whatever else happens to be time-bound. Now, some fraction of that 25% will be, of course, avoidable. What fraction is actually avoidable will vary per business, per vertical. It depends on a variety of factors. But the question is, how much? And if we don't, what a huge and tragic waste of time and human talent that is. It's such an important problem that a number of very serious studies have been done on this. So this one here happens to be from Harvard MGH. And as you can see from the pie chart, a large fraction of this is for legitimate reasons, but they're resolvable by communication. We believe that there's a great joint opportunity here, and to really understand the magnitude, we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so in the shoes of the business and the client. So let's take a look at the perspective of the dental office. Right after this, I'm going to demo a few scenarios, but as we go through each one, I'm hoping you think about two things. One of them is the dollar value of the scenario, which we'll cover in this slide. And the second one is the amount of bot intelligence that's needed to cover that scenario, and that's on the next slide. So here, regarding dollar value, for better or for worse, we really have to think of rescheduling like a marketing funnel. In principle, all these people who have signed up for an appointment should be a shoo-in, but in fact they're not. These are the people for whom dumb appointment reminders are not working. They're the people who are worth $400,000 a year for our sample dental office. And so these people are the 25%, if you like. And let's think about the fate of these people if we can manage to renegotiate a time with them. So as we look at the funnel, the very most important result is that we do a move and backfill, meaning that the individual gets a new appointment time and the appointment slot that they vacated is open early enough in the process that somebody else can backfill it. That's the golden case where we recoup all of the $100 to $200 an hour burn rate. Now, there are other cases. So we could do a move without a backfill. The person might at the very last second reschedule. In that case, we have recouped, we've filled an empty seat. We don't know whether that empty seat would have been filled by somebody else, but at least we got this particular patient in the door. But they may have done it so late that it was, we spent the time, their original appointment time, cleaning out the closet or straightening out the magazine rack. So that's obviously worth less than $100 to $200 an hour. Exactly what fraction it is depends very much on all those details that I just talked about. And then finally, there are going to be some people who, from whom we get no reply. They don't show up and they never reschedule, so they're just gone permanently. And in that case, everybody in the office might as well have taken a nap. We get zero revenues to compensate for the burn rate at that time. And for some people, they're just off the grid, or there's a family emergency. There are also emotional issues that have been well understood. In some verticals, people are just afraid to come in. And so the chair stays empty. But it's very clear that regardless of all, or independent of all of these variables, the value of rescheduling is easily measured in tens of dollars per hour at least, once you take all the funnel probabilities into consideration, or in some cases maybe pushing up into the $100 an hour. So that's a lot of headroom to share margin. All right, so that's the funnel economics. And now, as I promised, let's look a little bit at the bot IQ scale. So a lot of our ability to capture people into the funnel depends on how seamlessly we can adapt to their needs. And much of that is about the bot's intelligence. Just think of the human analog. If you had wanted to assign a human being to recapturing some of these no-shows in a 24/7 manner, how would you choose the person to do that job, and how would you instruct them? Well, we can divide bots today into roughly 4 generations. So generation 1, these are the bots that are essentially the IVR of the 1990s, or some would argue 80s, or even 70s, taking those into a bot-type interaction, one that looks superficially like a bot. Also, the WAP menus of the 90s would fall into this category. Many bots are, from a logical standpoint, just the same thing taken into the world of English keywords. And in those scenarios, the machine is fully in charge. The machine is asking all the questions, and the human being is the slave. At generation 2, we have smart speakers, and we have devices that are able to understand what you might call Siri speak, a language that is superficially English, but we have to twist our words to be understood. We can still say only simple things. And by the way, in those cases, the table is turned 180 degrees. The human is completely in charge, the machine is the slave, and it's not really collaborating. In generation 3 is where we start to find free-form natural language sentences. What I mean by free-form is we use the same level of language that we would use when talking to another human being. And what happens now is that our dialogue becomes filled with curveballs and digressions. We have a real collaboration with a give and take. And in generation 4, we have more understanding of relationships and shared context. I mentioned at the beginning that our bot platform is capable of handling three-way conversations with both a visitor and a live agent. So we are understanding the relationship between those two parties and of course the bot. And when you get into this generation, contextual recall also becomes a very important part of the equation. Well, let's go ahead and look at some real-world examples. Here is Alan. By the way, at the end of the talk, I'll give you a number to try texting yourself live so you can see what the bot is able to do. But for now, Alan, maybe he's a college student. He's on a bus. He receives an appointment reminder, but the totalitarian driver will throw him off the bus if he makes a voice call. And the question is, if he has to make a call later, what are the odds he'll get back to it today? Well, let's see how the smart appointment bot lets him resolve it right now. To start with, there are no big surprises. The bot asks a couple of yes or no questions. And he just answers them. No, I'm sorry. What time would you like to reschedule an appointment for us? Sure. But in the real world, it's very rare to see in the millions of chats that have gone through our system, we rarely see a chat go all the way through in a fashion where the human being only answers the questions. Eventually, they'll throw a curveball. And in this case, here's an easy one. Instead of answering with a specific date and time, Alan decides to answer a question with a question. Wow, here's a bigger curveball. The bot asked about Monday, and of course that's its frame of mind, but Alan decides to ask about Friday. So he's on a completely different thread without having resolved the Monday question. Many bot systems are built around the concept of a decision tree, which is a generation 1 construct. I think you'll see that trying to support even this first scenario would become hopelessly complex if we tried to do it purely with the decision tree, because at every node of that decision tree, we'd be trying to accommodate every single curveball that might come our way, or simply abandon our ability to handle it. The result here is that Alan's all set. So let's stand in his shoes for a moment. What if the bot had said, if you'd like to reschedule, please call us? When in the rest of his day is he going to remember to do this? And if he's very responsible, maybe he does it, maybe not. So that's a place where people drop. Either they call back so late so that the slot can't be filled, or they forget entirely. Here's a different scenario. Mia realizes she has a conflict, but it's after hours. So hopefully the screen's updating for you there. And is this just one more thing that she'll need to remember in the morning? And by the way, this is not in response to an appointment reminder. She's remembering on the spot. And so here we are with a proactive inbound request from her. I'm sorry, can I move my appointment? If you look at the sentence structure of things she's saying, we're way past Siri speak at this point. But the other thing to notice about the dialogue is the give and take. We hardly notice it as human observers because it comes so naturally for us. But Mia the human and Jenna the bot are seamlessly taking turns holding the rudder. The other really powerful thing to note is that with the Lumen.ai platform, it's okay to have multiple conversation threads going on at once. So if you watch closely here, you see that the bot is talking about Thursday at 9, but Mia wants to sidetrack a little bit to the afternoon. And so the bot follows along and offers her an afternoon slot. But Mia, as many human beings would, changes her mind. She'll do Thursday at 9 after all. And that's totally fine. The bot picks right up where the conversation left off. So when a bot is built on the Lumen.ai system, it can keep many trains of thought going at once. And in real human conversation, I think everybody will realize that's not the exception, it's the rule. By the way, of course, did we mention you can, at any time if you have questions, you can type them into the ReadyTalk client, and it will see them and may be able to answer them in the heat of the moment. So the result is a quick resolution to a happy patient. And I think it's good to step back for a second and just notice, in the early days of natural language processing, the excitement was about catering to the needs of someone who didn't know how to use technology. Today, that's just not as much of an issue. For a business problem like this, the issue is more that there's a problem-solving dimension. We've all experienced having a human receptionist who insists on making us go through a rigid set of questions to narrow down a time, or maybe a troubleshooting scenario in a support situation, or some other scenario where we need to gather information from the end user. Real problem solving requires taking turns being in charge. It requires learning each other's preferences. It requires trying a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that challenge is certainly not unique to appointment scheduling. Now, we're not done climbing the bot IQ ladder, so let's level up one more time. Here's Davin. He has a more complex situation to address. He just doesn't have the time to answer the phone. He's stuck in a meeting. He's jammed for the rest of the day. And he knows that if he makes a phone call, he's going to have to wait on hold, and he'll have to wrangle all these complex preferences. So the challenge is that his work has him tied up with lots of constraints. Whoops, it looks like there's a little bit of a time lag there. I'm going to let it catch up a little bit. Does next week work? I'm busy every day until 4:30 p.m. That's one constraint. We could schedule you for 4:30 on Thursday, about a week out. Would that work? No, unfortunately, July 5th is totally jammed. So the interesting thing here is the bot has learned two of Davin's constraints. There's a time constraint. He'd rather start late in the day. There's a date constraint. His July 5th is really packed. And so how will the bot handle this situation? Well, for one thing, the bot realizes that human preferences aren't always black and white. So in this case, there's a trade-off. So Davin says, I could do July 6th at 9 a.m. Well, I thought you said that before 4:30 wasn't going to work out. Well, Davin realizes that if he insists on late afternoon, he's probably not getting on the calendar for another week or two. And that's contradictory enough that bots that are obsessive compulsive will not understand it. In fact, I would venture to say that some people in this situation would have a little trouble being flexible. But because of how the Lumen.ai platform treats what it learns from a human user, it has no trouble working with the trade-off. So the result is that Davin can make up his own mind about the trade-off. He chooses a morning appointment on the later day, on the earlier day, sorry. And that's critical because, by the way, this is also a win-win for the dental office. Davin's taking July 6th means that the dental office has more runway to fill slots 1 or 2 weeks from now. So this is great. We already have a couple of questions here. They're pretty quick to address. One person says, what happens when two people try to schedule an appointment for the same date and same time at the same time? So this is a little bit like the airplane reservation system. You don't want two people sitting in seat 2A. Well, the bot is smart enough to check with the live calendar, and at the point that it promises an appointment to the end user, the job's not done. There is some chance it will come back and say, I'm sorry, I know I said it was available, but somebody else took it in the meantime. Somebody else is asking, we learned some preferences from the user, so we know that Davin can usually not make it in before 4:30 p.m. Can preferences like that be saved from one session to the next? Yeah, the answer is yes. And I have to say that it's important to figure out whether you actually want that kind of information to be saved. Is Davin's aversion to appointments before 4:30 p.m., will it still be valid in the context of his next conversation? But from a technical point of view, absolutely, those can be saved in a way that's meaningful for the next session. Which, by the way, I think is an important point to be made about the nature of the underlying platform. Some platforms store information in an opaque way so that the next rev can't even understand what the previous rev said. But with Lumen.ai, the new rev is able to, if you like, decompose and reconstruct what was said. All right, let's just do one more quick scenario before we discuss what this all means. A simple problem calls for a simple solution. I've been showing scenarios that lead to pushing the bot a little bit harder, but this particular one is very straightforward. Yael just barely made the plane. She has about 30 seconds to deal with her appointment. The doors are closing. There's not even enough time to let the phone ring. So the bot is perfectly happy to work with situations like this as well. All right, let's shift gears here. There have been some very good questions about the functionality of the bot, but let's think about the value chain. Players all the way up and down this value chain are going to wind up happy. We just saw how the patient winds up happy because the interaction happens anytime, anywhere, and gets fully resolved. Now, what about the dental office? This is what I mean by the vendor. It could be the dentist or the doctor or the therapist or the salon or the massage practice. Well, they wind up happy too, which is a good thing because that's where the dollars are being generated. And the important thing to notice here is this isn't just about making life easier for the receptionist. That's a pretty small value proposition because the receptionist is already hired, and if all we're doing is saving them a phone call, there's not much to it. This is about not losing the full burn rate of the entire office. This is about covering the use cases where calling back was either not an option or not a priority for the end user. And this next point is not quite as obvious. Conflicts tend to resolve faster when you can pounce on them right away with an interactive bot. And so the slot frees up sooner, allowing more time to fill it. And so the nice benefit is that in addition to front-loading all of these slots, we wind up not clashing quite as much with clients. So whenever things are left dangling and somebody came in late or they forgot to cancel, nobody wins. It's just a little bit awkward and puts a pall on the relationship. So this is a very interesting question. What if there's a constraint from a third party? Consider a real estate situation where a realtor has a showing appointment and the homeowner needs to confirm a time change. Well, that's a great example. So in some verticals, dental included, but with a realtor, maybe even more importantly, the person is tied up, and it may be that the person asking for the time change needs to communicate with somebody, and that's the only person available. We've noticed that with service providers. the electricians on top of a step ladder or under a sink at the time that the request comes in. So absolutely, that's a great scenario and use case. I hope I understood the question properly. If not, please clarify. But let's take a look at the point of view of the ISVs. So there are many ISVs in this space. We're thinking here about patient communication systems or practice management systems. And the beauty of this is that those players already have great reach into small and medium businesses and into chain practices. So the value chain is already worked out. We don't have to convince the dental office that sending out SMS reminders is a great thing. They're already receiving them. The practices are already calendaring their clients electronically. And they're also accustomed to buying services from a provider like this. So that makes our sales task much easier. And the other thing it does is it means that we have a lot less need to stand in line behind a big deployment. So a lot of the hard integration work has already been done. And so the only question is, would you like to change your dumb outbound appointment reminders to smart ones so that you start your fishing net to bring in patients or clients is a lot more effective? All right. Let's do a final flash poll here. Speaking as a service provider, or indeed as anybody else in the industry, if these questions apply to you, what will most support your survival and growth as the industry shifts? And I realize the answer to this will depend a lot on what you think the industry shifts are. But if these apply to you and you're not a service provider, please still feel free to reply. And as you're thinking about this, I'll say as you think about your, and by the way, please go ahead and choose your two best answers. As you think about your macro strategy for surviving and thriving, what are your top priorities? I've been in companies that live on the bleeding edge most of the time, and less often I've been in companies that prefer a fast follower strategy. And I just wanted to acknowledge there's value in both of those. But I have to say that fast following has to be very, very fast these days because the folks who are first to market can ramp up so much faster given all the advantages we have from electronic and network infrastructure these days. All right, we've got quite a few answers here. Let's go ahead and look at the results. And I'd like to make sure we have a decent amount of time for the interactive Q&A portion of our meeting, which we will start in a moment. But before we go there, let me comment on the strategy from, oops, I guess it's up to me to re-show the slides. So let me go ahead and do that. I will share my turtles again, and here we go. So yeah, we've been talking in depth about solving the appointment no-show issue, which we think is associated with a lot of dollars. But in your particular case, there may be some other application-to-person opportunity that happens to be a better fit, either because of whom you're already engaged with or because of other priorities that you have. Maybe it's a customer support application. Maybe it's a different vertical need. Maybe it's something else entirely. But that's what I mean by multiplying into other A2P opportunities driven by AI. Of course, with any of these opportunities, we're adding traffic. So we'll get incremental SMS hits because there's a lot more back and forth to resolve one of these appointments. But I'd hope that a much larger effect is driving up the value of each DID. Because now the value of a transaction is measured in dollars and not in pennies. Yes, retention. Wow, that's getting to be a real issue in telecom because switching costs are dropping to almost zero. But I think some of the really powerful questions are, who on your customer list will stay closer to you and pay you more because you're addressing a business need uniquely in a way that's not fungible? And also, something I often hear is there's a prospect who'd love to move to SMS or a UC deployment, but just doesn't have the human staff to man it. And in conversations like that, the automated bot may just be the ticket, because now you can handle all that traffic automatically or semi-automatically. Well, let's go ahead and open this up. Let me see if there are. Let's go to discussion, and just wanted to be your turn to drive the discussion. Remember that we're monitoring the chat channel here. And by the way, before we launch into this phase, I'd also like to say I happen to be available for a private phone conversation immediately after the webinar. Obviously, I can do that with only one party or maybe a couple of them. But just in case this turns out to be a perfect time to follow up, and in case you feel a little bit reluctant to share sort of private questions in the public webinar. The other thing is we do have a demo line open for you to text if you'd like to give the appointment bot a spin for yourself. And we'll keep it pointed to that bot for a few days at least. And there's also my contact information down there. All right, well, we got a question here. How technical is updating the bot? It needs to be tied to an appointment system. But if you have a specific messaging channel that you want the bot to use, can that be updated by a business person? Well, I would say that having it updated by a business person is a little bit of a stretch, but it's easy enough to do. So let's talk about customization. We have seen here how the appointment bot is being delivered through SMS. I didn't show the architecture diagram, but we can deliver any of this bot functionality through Facebook, Slack, Cisco Spark. We do a couple of custom channels for special needs of folks we work with. And making a new channel is not a big deal. So if there's something very specialized, we can do that as well. The transferring from one channel to another, that can be done fairly easily. It doesn't require a programmer. I would say that having your average business person do it might be a little bit of a stretch. The other point of customization that is really powerful in the system is the ability of, it happens on two levels. So one of them is customizing the bot to point to a different aggregate set of offices. So suppose you're Jones Dental Chain and you have 500 offices, and now Smith Dental Chain comes along and needs a different set of instructions, different branding, or even a different persona. So friendlier wording, something a little bit more slangy. That's very, very easy to do. And in addition to that, in this domain where you potentially have hundreds or thousands, or in our case, sometimes tens of thousands of small to medium businesses using the same bot, it's possible for that same bot to address the needs of all multiple thousand small to medium businesses independently with a single bot instance. And the customization can be per office. For instance, we may have thousands or hundreds or thousands of different dental offices, each with different hours and different address. That's easy to customize. And the customization can even be down to the logical level. So it may be that one office prefers a very liberal policy for cancellation, whereas another one does actually want to get the phone call. And so that's not hard to, it's not hard to make the behavior different from one office to another. And so that's the power of mass customization. The underlying platform it's not an exception, it's a core use case for us to be able to take the descriptions of many different offices within the same instance. And whenever we upgrade, of course, all those offices get the benefit of the same upgrade. All right, are the numbers, oh, I love this. Are the numbers used for SMS interaction with the bot the same numbers used for calling the business? Well, we haven't talked at all about SMS enablement, which is a very exciting trend in the industry today. And Telestacks has other webinars in this series that have talked. I believe they're in the past and not the future of the schedule. Telestacks, please correct me if I'm wrong. But you can today take a voice line and enable it to receive SMS. For example, I have a phone on my desk that is run by the PBX of our incubator here, Idea Lab. And I was able to cause my line to accept SMS inbound text without the IT people here or anybody else being involved. In fact, they don't even know I've done it. And the same thing can be done. And frankly, it's actually a security issue that somebody else can come in and grab your line. There are other folks in the Telestacks ecosystem who help plug up that security hole. But for our purposes today, yes, absolutely. The same number that you advertise for inbound voice calls, you can just start saying, I'm ready to take SMSs on that line. In fact, to many people's surprise, often those numbers are already receiving SMSs, and they're just falling on the floor. So what we would love to do in collaboration with Telestacks is take your voice line and SMS enable it, see what traffic is coming in, and also work with you to enable exactly that same line to start taking domain-specific traffic, like your appointment reschedules or something else. What if somebody engaged in an SMS conversation tries to call the number? Well, the voice, it's interesting. The world of voice and the world of SMS are completely independent of each other in the infrastructure. So SMS enabling it, my desk line at my desk is perfectly able to receive all the telemarketing voice calls that I get. All right, great question here. Can the bot initiate an appointment booking? Yes. So you saw having the bot initiate an appointment reminder, which is a core use case. But in addition, we can also support the scenario where you don't have an appointment yet, and the receptionist simply says, just expect a text from us going outbound, and you can just negotiate with the bot to land yourself an appointment. So we left that scenario out of the demos today, just because it's very similar to what you already saw, and you can expect the same level of sophistication in the bot's ability to interact with the calendar. By the way, when we were talking about integrations, I forgot to mention that the system can be integrated with many different calendars. So for instance, the live instance that you saw, in fact the live instance you'll text if you try 209-299-9299 is a Google Calendar. But if you have some proprietary system or you find that some other calendar system is important in your marketplace, in your target market, we can absolutely do an integration that is, there's an abstraction layer that lets us do that. So that work is very independent of us. Let's see. What if user has okay, what if, let's see, now, oh wow, there are a lot of questions here. How does the bot know the available slots? I mentioned earlier that much about the bot is customizable. You can use different branding, different wording, even change how strict or lenient it is about various scenarios. Well, one of the other things that is a very standard part of the customization is the hours for the office. So there's a secure API call that is used to specify the hours for a given office, and we can even specify a multiplicity for each of those slots. So you can say between 9 and 10, we can take one patient at a time, but between 10 and 2, we've got 2 people in, and so we can put people in parallel. Can the SMS's responses include URLs in the message? Absolutely yes. How does the bot know? Oh, we just did that one. Hope I'm understanding SMS enablement correctly. Is there an API available for the bot that would allow a business to take full advantage of the bot without transferring the SMS capabilities over? Well, I'm going to have to defer to Telestacks on that question. So the question is, can the same SMS number be used with the bot or also for manual interaction? Technologically, on the Lumen side, there's no obstacle for that. The only question is whether whether on the ResCom side, there's a way to allow a human being to come in and answer instead. No problem. In fact, I'll say that in our 3-way scenarios, we have a live agent. The live agent and the bot can both, if they like, reply to the user, to the end user, and they just have an organized way of passing the baton back and forth. Unlike many systems, with many systems, you have serial one-on-one interactions, meaning that the bot interacts with the visitor until it runs out of steam, and then it hands the baton to the live agent once, and then the baton never hands back. In our case, it can go back and forth, and so we can measure deflection rates on a per message level, not just on a per chat level. What if a user has 2 different appointments for the same dentist? I always believe in disclosing limitations, and that's one. The current version of the bot assumes that you have only 1 appointment for a given dentist, and so currently it will say, I'm sorry, you already have an appointment, I can't do 2 at once. Now, if you have multiple family members, that's another matter, and that's actually on the roadmap, and we would love to engage with folks who have very specific needs like that. In dental, I acknowledge that that's a common thing where a parent might be handling appointments for children. We would love to engage, and we prioritize a roadmap, of course, based on who's getting engaged with us. And so, of course, that's one of the benefits of interacting with us early. You can get your fingerprints on priorities in the roadmap. Who does all the API integrations? Well, we have been doing them in-house, but we have a certain amount of capability to let somebody else do, for instance, the calendar integration. Or one of the other things that we predict is going to be common is that we work with a service provider, and the service provider wants to own the admin console. And so in that case, we would expect the GUI for the console to be developed by somebody else, and we would expect them to shoot API calls into our system. Pricing models available at the moment. We have some flexibility on that. We believe that there's a lot of margin to be shared between the provider, the vendor, and the service provider, and Telestacks and us. We also believe that in different deals we may have different levels of desire to favor pricing over volume or vice versa. Yes. Do we have API docs? Yes, we do. We'd like to work with you. We typically don't share those publicly. We typically do that in context of a private conversation. So let's see. Can we do initial trials and customizations? Yes, we would love to. The way we would normally work is let's get the communication lines open early. Let's find out what your use case is. Let's find out what the functionality gap there is, if any. and we'll prioritize those. And let's, just as we're doing here, let's get a line open for you as soon as possible so that you can kick the tires and figure out where exactly. So instead of having to do the gap analysis and prioritization purely on paper and with imaginations, we have people who are actually using it in real life, and we're prioritizing our development accordingly. Let's see. There's a comparison with Amazon Lex. There are many platforms available for doing natural language processing. And in our case, we actually began integrating with some of those third parties. What we found is that many of them are very, very rigid. So for instance, when we did the Lex integration, we just tried a few very specific examples. At the time, we were kicking the tires with car rental. So we said, can I rent a car? And it would recognize that. But if we said, can I rent a red car or can I rent a four-door car, it would break. And the reason for that is that their system was just looking for sequences of words. And in fact, there were even constructs that didn't mean, can I rent a car, but had the same sequence of words, and we could trick it to get the wrong meaning. So you'll find that different natural language processing platforms are in different levels of maturity and have been designed for different use cases. Amazon Lex is perfectly adequate for the Alexa use case, where people are using rigid, predefined command syntax, and they have to learn exactly how to phrase something to get something done. So let's see whom I have skipped here. We're coming right up to the end of the hour. I'm going to, if it's okay with Telestacks, I'll keep on going finding a couple more questions here to answer. Otherwise, as I mentioned, I am available for private conversation in case there's something you'd like to that's very specific to you or confidential. In the meantime, let me put this number front and center, and I'm just going to keep on going until I get a message that says, please stop. So let's go for another 3 or 4 minutes here. Is it possible to integrate the platform with online consultations? I'm going to need a clarification on that. What's an online consultation? I'm also going to need a clarification on, can the solution work for SSM? I'm just not sure what that stands for. Okay, so here's a question. What does it take to build a bot for a different use case? Well, we find that the fast part of building a bot is doing the technical work. The slowest part, to be completely honest, is pinning down the requirements. And so what we found in practice is that the best way to go about it is to begin with some concrete sample conversations. And these are not sample conversations with somebody who's pretending to be a user, because usually engineers have trouble putting themselves in the shoes of end users. One of the best ways to do that is just go into your current line and see what SMSs are currently being received. And you'll be very surprised to see what's in there. And so we can go from that to understanding what people are really needing, and from that to the requirements. Online and audio. This is the question about the online consultations, online video and audio calls. Well, we can certainly have a line that is simultaneously doing a voice call and accepting text messages. And certainly we can do that concurrently with a video call. So if I understand that question correctly, I will say the answer is yes, that all three of these things can be going on at the same time. Field service management. FSM is field service management, many engineers traveling to many households. Yes, so if somebody's out in the field and they may have have a line that they use to communicate with the main office. We can have a bot represent them and field all of their requests while they're out. Does it support other languages other than English? Currently, we've put a lot of tender loving care into English. We don't support other languages yet, but we would love to talk about the use case and see what else is out there. All right, so we're 5 minutes past the hour. Just love to thank you for your time. Really appreciate the interest here. I feel like there's been a lot of vitality in the conversation, a lot of very good and relevant questions. We appreciate that. We look forward to engaging. In the meantime, if you'd like to talk some more now or later, please email me or text me, or indeed, if the Ready Talk line is still open, you can engage with us there. And so I'm going to turn the time back over to Maria from Telestacks.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it. Want to thank everybody for joining us today. For additional information on Lumen, please visit their website at lumen.ai. Feel free to take advantage of the demo line, the 209 number that you see on your screen right now. And for additional information about Telestacks or the ResCom One Marketplace or ResCom One, please visit telestacks.com. Thanks so much, and goodbye.